understanding your relationship with your mother is the key to all of your relationships. You're listening to the Bear in Mind podcast, episode 170.
A podcast that breaks it down so you can break the cycle for good. Now, your host, Tara Rama, but you can call her T.
So every 10 episodes, I talk about something, or in this case, someone that I didn't necessarily love, and now I love. And I love my mother. Prior to this, as an adult, I had the whole range of negative emotions. As a kid, I felt the unconditional love that kids have towards their parents. And then when I got into the adult phase, I went through a lot of things and realizations, and I didn't feel love. And I also had a lot of ups and downs in all of my relationships, in my female friendships, in my relationship with my partner, and a little bit in the beginning when I became a parent, the relationship with my child. And I want to let you know this will be the last love episode. All the way from number 10 to 170 is going to be the last love episode. It's also going to be a pause in podcasting. The very last episode will be 175. So I'm going to give you my all, like in the 170 episodes, and give you my all for the last 5 as well. And I will have more details in the last episode about what the next steps are, because the content's not going away. It's just the pause in podcasting. Okay, so your mother. And here I am referring to your first mother. If you have had several mothers along the way, or whatever form that has taken shape in your life, I am referring to the first mother. And the first mother is the one that carried you in her womb and gave birth to you. Start here with your first mother. And then you can work in kind of in this way of copy and paste to all your other relationships. But the core will always be that relationship with your first mother. Now, in some cases, the first mother is the person that raised us. In some cases, the first mother is there, and then there's a second mother, maybe through adoption, all different variations. Healing that first relationship, because that is actually how we learn about relationships, is with our first mother. And understanding it, and even if today you love your mother, understanding it and looking at it can help you unlock so many things in your current relationships, help you how you go about relationships. Those relationship patterns maybe that you begin to notice an adult when you maybe have some friendships that don't go your way, fall apart for whatever reason. Maybe you've gone through divorce. Some of those patterns can get unlocked by looking at that first mother. And there are so many things that relationship teaches you. And I think that is one of the first things that I started to realize that once I started understanding more of my emotions and going on a journey of continuously understanding my emotions, I began to see that she taught me so many things. And my first outlook was a lot of negative things, but I can also see a lot of positive things today. And so that relationship teaches you a lot about how to be in a relationship. How do you want to be in a relationship? For example, when I became a parent, the thing that I was saying to myself was, I don't want a parent like her. Instead of maybe asking the more effective question is, what kind of parent do I want to show up? And then when my daughter was the baby, I started to do this work on my first mother and really looking at it, and I started where I was at. If you're in a negative place or if you're in a positive place with your first mother, I wrote it all out. And I talk about writing things out to help you get perspective, because if it's behind your eyes, you don't have perspective. And when you write it out on a sheet of paper, guess what? It's in front of your eyes. And writing out all of those things that I didn't like. even doing this one exercise, you can begin to even maybe look at some of those things and say, do I show up like this? All of those judgments that we have of our mother, we, in fact, probably show up in our lives in similar ways. Maybe not in the same exact way that she showed up, but in another element of our life, we may be behaving like this. An example of this is one of the things that my mom did as punishment, and I didn't know that this would happen until I found out my stuff was gone. She would throw away some of my things. She threw away, well, this is aging me, CDs, and she threw away a lot of things, and then I would come home from school, and then they wouldn't be there. And it was as punishment for something, and I often didn't know what I had done wrong. And one of the things that I did when my daughter started exhibiting those toddler years is I started to threaten her that I would take away her toys. Yes, I'm admitting I did that. So it started to show up, and as I was doing this, I was really surprised. And it was such a powerful exercise to write out everything because it's already in your head. You're running with all of these judgments. If you're judging your mother, you're running with them, you're thinking about it. It comes up if you're yelling at your child. And writing out all of them and seeing how it turns up in your life, it can be really eye-opening. And it doesn't mean don't use it as a way to beat up yourself, because bringing up that awareness, it could be kind of a jolt to the system. But then you can kind of see those patterns. Oh, I am doing this and I learned this. And that is one of the reasons that I started to see that she is teaching me so much about relationships. She's teaching me about how I want to show up in relationships. And from that, I can then course correct. I call course correct. So for example, the throwing away stuff, that now I'm not going to threaten that. I can see how I have those similar patterns. So I haven't done that. As I did some of this work and worked through my emotions, it wasn't night and day. Seeing that list and understanding how I was showing up in my relationship with my child, it really changed that course of that relationship. And the second thing that I did that brought me closer to loving her in an unconditional way today is I wrote out all the things that I wanted her to do. What was we use this thing in coaching, we call it the manual. What are all of the things I wanted her to show up? It could be even things like, oh, you wanted your mom to bake cookies with you. You wanted her to spend time listening to you, listening to your problems, watching TV with you, coming to your games if you were in a sport, or coming to your recital. All of those things that you wanted her to do and she didn't do, that can also open up and tell you about how you want to show up in relationships. You can look at that and be like, oh, I want to be there for my kids' things. One of the things that when I did this exercise was my mom never dropped me off. There were times that she did. It's not that she never dropped me off at school, but we lived really close to our school and it was on her way to work. And so it's walking. So you just walk down this one road and you pass my school, and then down the road is where she worked. And she never walked with me to school. And so I always thought, as a parent, I said one of the things I was going to do was always drop and pick up my kid. Now, that's not for everyone, but for me, it was how I wanted to show up in my relationship. That's something that was important to me. Someone else, in your list, you're going to have something else completely different, but knowing what's on that list can help you figure out what are the things that are really important to you. And this was one of the things that was really important to me. And someone else would be like, oh, it doesn't matter. What's important to me is showing up for every recital or everything like that. Now, I don't do that. I don't show up to I don't take her to birthday parties. There are some things that I don't think that are important, but this is one of the things that helped me see how I wanted to show up in relationships. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't have kids, and how do I show up in my romantic relationships or my friendships? It'll teach you that, because one of the things that I learned when I did this list is I didn't like that my mom put down my friends. and talked about my friends to me in a negative way. And so today I can find out that when one of my friends is talking about another friend, like it's really triggering. And it was something that I was doing. I was talking about people in a way that wasn't positive. Maybe I wasn't name calling them, but I was definitely not sharing stuff that was positive. And so when I show up in my friendships and I talk to people, I don't talk about other people. I don't even talk about my family usually. I mean, I might say some things, but I'm not talking about their experiences or what they did, and I don't go into details about anything like that. All I'll say is that they're doing well, and I won't tell their stories because it always used to frustrate me to hear other people's stories when I'd rather hear the story from the person whose story it belongs to. And doing these two things, writing out all the judgments and then writing out all the ways in which you wanted her to show up, you can then do this, copy and paste it for all the relationships. But really start with your first mother. You will be amazed at how much of those patterns, when you do the copy and paste, will show up. All of those same judgments will show up. The manual will show up. You will start to see patterns in it. And how I got to love is when I went through this whole exercise and I can see how I had developed in my relationships, in my adult relationships, I could then start to tap into some sort of empathy. I can understand where that was maybe coming from. And I can begin then to see what were some of the things that were wonderful about the relationship. I had a good education. I was not homeless. We had a roof over our head. We had food on the table. Those were some of the things I was not seeing because all I was doing was looking at the judgments. And when I got it all out and I could see patterns, and I can see those patterns in myself, I could see that there was my own suffering was intertwined with some of those behaviors of how I was showing up, and that she had her own suffering tied into how her behaviors were showing up as a parent. So I'll wrap up those two exercises. One, write out all the judgments, all the negative thoughts. Keep filling it up, keep going, exhaust that list. Look at it. See if you're showing up somehow in your relationships that way. And number two, write out how you wanted her to show up. And look at that and see that as a source of inspiration for how you want to show up in your relationships, as a guidebook, not how you don't want to show up, but as knowing exactly how you want to be in all of your relationships. That's all I have for you this week. I'll check back with you next.
Thanks for listening. Listen for a new episode next Tuesday by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Bye for now.